Mr. President, Mr. Putin, I have no hammer to pound, no scythe to swing, no axe to grind. My base of influence is first and foremost that of an ordinary citizen of the world, global citizen, and secondly that of Vice President of the Athens-based World Philosophy Forum, WPF. My appeal is simple. My appeal is on behalf of Alexei Navalny, who did not know that he had been given a toxic nerve agent and survived. Angela Merkel intervened to have him receive medical treatment in Berlin. In allowing him to be flown to Berlin on the bequest of his wife, you participated in his recovery. On January 17, 2021, he returned to Russia. He was immediately detained on the grounds of violating terms of a suspended jail sentence. Russian prosecutors have not yet opened a criminal investigation into the poisoning of Navalny, who heads Russia's anti-corruption foundation. States have the power to right wrongs, shed light or to obscure, to mystify or enlighten. No one should have to face death twice. You have the power to convert dark tidings into silver linings. Socrates, whose unwritten words and thoughts still influence, willingly took hemlock once and paid the price. It seems to me that all states without exclusion have the power to victimize, destroy, and kill perceived irritants. A victim can be denied justice while the perpetrating actors fade into the woodwork or are even rewarded. Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest? Thomas Becket, Rasputin shot, priest-scholar Pavel Florensky, exiled in 1928 and executed in 1937, Fra Anton Ross, imprisoned, brutalized, scheduled for execution and rescued by Soviet troops, Enrique Angelelli, Martin Luther King. All states have pathways to clemency. All states have pathways to rejuvenation. Turning to Voropov, Stalin asked what were the most urgent needs. People, clever people. Unfortunately, we have too many officials in Moscow and too few leaders in the provinces. The time has come for an all-out world war against poverty. The rich nations must use their vast resources of wealth to develop the underdeveloped, school the unschooled, and feed the unfed. Ultimately, a great nation is a compassionate nation. Milk. Mr. Putin, it is not easy for me to address a president, first and foremost because his or her answer would come close to a miracle. But a surprise that comes close to one may yet surprise. Life without the courage to take new steps is probably boring. My step, I hope, is clear. I have no moral maxim, which is surprisingly useful on occasions when we find little else to justify our actions. This according to Fyodor Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky was led before the firing squad but received a last-minute reprieve and sent to a Siberian labor camp. Sanctions have been imposed on 6 senior Russian officials and a state chemical center. Sanctions relating to Mr. Navalny. That impact pipeline in the final stage of development would have been better leveled earlier, focusing on the environmental degradation and ongoing climate warming. I believe that well-applied treaties are far better than sanctions, an example being the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, which enters into force on Friday, January 22, 2021. In passing, I would ask that you re-examine it. The Kremlin today welcomed a proposal by U.S. President Joe Biden to extend the last remaining nuclear non-proliferation treaty between the two countries, which expires in less than 2 weeks. The recent and ongoing protests in the USA and Russia demonstrate great asymmetry in purpose, the first to destroy democracy, the second to bring democracy. Hungarian government decided to punish the Serbs with economic sanctions. Specifically, in an attempt to reduce its economic dependence on the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Serbia began to import French rather than Austrian munitions in 1904 and established a customs union with Bulgaria in 1905, ending the sale of tariff-laden Austrian goods in Serbia. Sanctions on Serbia and on Yugoslavia precipitated a running down of health services as technology failed and could not be maintained, and as doctors were cut off from medical intelligence from the international community. 2 questions came my way recently: which vaccine and what would I have said to Putin? My advice was to take any vaccine available, new technology before old, and with Sputnik ahead of some others. Some 3 to 4 years ago my name surfaced as a nominee for the prestigious Gazi Peace Prize, which I received late 2019. Sometime later I suggested that Michelle Obama be nominated. Great people can lose their humility and powerful empires lose greatness. In 1939 lights went out over Europe, Poland was invaded and an awful, devastating struggle against fascism unfolded. Britain and France entered the war with a mission to save the world from fascism. With America's entry into the war and the great struggle of the Soviet Union, the Allies came through victorious, a true silver lining. Nazi Germany was defeated, but it did not end fascism. Many of those who had survived the death camps roamed the streets in despair with a flag of their respective country stitched to their breast. From time to time, I have approached authority requesting clemency and freedom for individuals whom I thought had done no wrong, an Ethiopian, or whose cause was noble. KBP, America, petitioned politics for greater recognition and support for global public health, even suggesting that its coordination reside in the UN Security Council, and participated in the development and writing of Balkan-relevant documents on public health, peace and human rights, population reduction, vulnerability and human security. Eskinder Nega was arrested as a suspected terrorist, identified as a spy for foreign forces by state-controlled media, and jailed for 7 years. In 2011, my personal appeal went through the collective conscience of international public health, rightfully worried that any statement in its name would prove detrimental to those detained. My personal petition represented a small spontaneous act calling for an end to his life-threatening predicament. 7 Catholic activists illegally entered the largest nuclear submarine base in the world, Kings Bay Naval Submarine Base, Georgia, to symbolically disarm U.S. Trident nuclear weapons. They were calling attention to the destructive capacity of nuclear weapons. My simple request was to return them to the sunny side of the street as an act for humanity and to make the world a little wiser. My Balkan experience includes work in the European Center Peace and Development, Belgrade, through which I have interacted with colleagues from Moscow. In Greece I worked closely with Igor Kondratian, Russian philosopher and president of the Athens-based World Philosophical Forum, WPF, which he founded more than a decade ago to reinvigorate classical philosophy as a strategic instrument in decision-making and with a purposeful platform to reduce social dementia and remove the threat of nuclear catastrophe. Greece is center field to numerous challenges and promising opportunities for change and development. One challenge is that of strengthening geo-economic diplomacy in the extraction reservoirs of energy in the eastern Mediterranean. In doing so, it should aim at minimizing contributions to climate change, making it easier to live with extreme weather phenomena in the future as it does now with seismic activity, and to become better prepared to face an awful menu of more frequent disasters. He pushes for refinement of neural systems that came through evolution and now through philosophy. He is suggesting that there are implications for the use of neurophysiology to moderate human behavior upwards in the direction of refinement and explain social dementia which pulls it down. Philosophy is a vital guide and vehicle that can modulate behavior and carry it along that upward route and keep it on track. My life is and has been an interesting odyssey. At first light it taught me that Hector was a better man than Odysseus and that the Acropolis was the most refined edifice constructed by man. My odyssey over time and geographical space has brought me a long way, given me the opportunity to see many parts of the world, and after COVID I hope will continue to do so, and allowed me to spend 2 decades in America, which I loved, and has let me down in Greece as a global citizen. I believe that my odyssey became possible as a result of my Yorkshire background and a scholarship granted to me by its then West Riding. In the Evening Light FDR said, "Progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much, it is whether we provide enough for those who have too little." At Yalta Roosevelt sat together with Churchill and Stalin and divided up the world. As the Big Three met, it was rumored that Churchill gave up boxing just before the war. As a child in wartime Britain, Joseph Stalin was Uncle Joe. All the river dons in northern England and Russia seemed to coalesce as I read Sholokov Quiet Flows the Don, and I penned letters to a pal in the USSR. 2 poignant memories, both I believe front-page newspaper photographs, the mushroom cloud and the back of Moscow Dynamo's goalkeeper peering out into the London fog to follow the ball. Being in Georgia, I had to see the birthplace of Uncle Joe. I stood on his train and entered his humble home. Stalin came to support pseudoscience which helped to precipitate famine and send a great plant physiologist to his death from starvation in the Gulag. Alexei Navalny received a scholarship to the Yale World Fellows Program at Yale University in 2010. My arrival in the USA was supported by a State Department scholarship fellowship in the fields of education and biomedical engineering and coincided with summer riots in Chicago. 2 years later, when the news of Martin Luther King's assassination broke, I was on the south side of Chicago. All hell broke loose and Chicago burned. It was a sad and frightening moment. While for me my 2-decade stay in America was a silver lining, today racism still prevails and COVID is a terrible way to die. Abraham Lincoln scribbled a few words on paper, signed it and handed it to old man. It read, "Job Smith is not to be shot until further orders from me." I thought, said the father, that it was to be a pardon. "You may order him to be shot next week." Lincoln, seeing fear in the old man, replied, "Well, my old friend, I see you are not very well acquainted with me. If your son never looks on death till further orders come from me, he will live longer than Methuselah." Eskander Nega upon release suggested caution, for the journey is incomplete. The only certainty being that the immediate future holds more hardship, more sacrifice, more tears, more imprisonment, exile, and even death. A tale about spring in Sakhan, where the calendar there ran slow when buds opened on trees and birds lost to winter, sang. At a mountain spring 2 young men met, one just home from the war's terrible front. They were in love with the same girl. I read this tale by Georgi Gulaya just after its publication, and more than 5 decades later, being in Georgia, it became a primary purpose and I was able to track its location down. French-Canadian Félix de Harel, having accepted Stalin's invitation to work in the Tbilisi Institute of Public Health, was welcomed as a hero and dedicated a book to Comrade Stalin, which was later banned. He was happy to be working again with his friend and founder of the institute, George Ilyeva, and built a cottage on the grounds. Within a year de Harel fled to Tbilisi but gained an intervention from the French president with Stalin to stay his friend's execution. Beria said no to Stalin, and Ilyeva, staff, and Polish wife, a soprano, were executed. Ilyeva was executed and denounced as an enemy of the people, but his crime was being in love of the same woman as Beria. Some years before his death, 1949, the man who brought knowledge and salvation from disease ravaging the eastern states wrote, "To realize a new equilibrium, myths and what they engender must disappear. It is necessary that the field of experience is extended to all that is human, because under its aegis all the power of hope and well-being quickly become realities. The past meets the future. But to achieve this we must understand what is the deeper meaning of experience, understand why it is, and always will be, the only infallible guide to understand what is the value of experience." De Harel saw science at its best as a way for a better future. To address the 5 interlocking injustices of systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation/denial of healthcare, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism, calls for reconstruction, not reset. Freedom for all, charity at home and abroad, and silver linings. Although we live in dark times, thankfully there are always rare silver linings. With respect to America, a new and difficult day dawns with great prospects and challenges, and with many one paycheck away from homelessness. One summing up, paraphrased and eloquently applicable today, came from Maxim Gorky, freed after worldwide protest from his dungeon prison for participation in the abortive 1905 revolution. He referred to the privileged, the boss, living a life of depravity in luxurious surroundings, buying congressmen, and hypocritically lecturing citizens on their Christian duty, shun worldly goods, avoid envy and socialism, and work to increase the wealth of the privileged, capitalist, class. America for him was the most democratic of countries, and believed that Russia one day was destined to stand next to it as the land of democratic ideas. Later, and at the time of the Russian Revolution, he appealed to the world for help as a result of crop failure and famine. His death in 1936 still contains mystery. It was alleged to have been a result of poisoning. Gorky suffered from tuberculosis, Alexei Navalny not. They don't report the truth to Stalin, said Lena in early 1945. It's all plans and plans, but what about us human beings? And Lena the protester in 2021 says, I'm not against Putin or for Navalny, I just want to live like a human being, live normally, like a normal person.